Okay, so this is my spring quarter sprint video for the CrowdCheer project. I'm going to be talking about the work that I've done this quarter on the project. So the work was mostly sort of in two buckets. So one was just spending a lot of time thinking about the conceptual side of CrowdCheer in terms of what our actual contributions are and what are the design arguments. And then the second part was doing a lot of tech work and implementation of new features within the app, which I will get into shortly. So I feel like this project has been inspired by this question, which is just imagine if we could crowdsource support as we worked towards our goals. So for example, what if we could crowdsource personalized support from spectators while we were running during our first marathon? Or what if we could get support from different peers in a research group while working through a research project for the first time? And so I think this led to the core research question of this project, which is how can we design crowdsourcing systems that can actually continuously support a requester's progress through an activity that's in real time? So it's not just providing support in like a one-off task or something like that. There's this need to really like monitor the situation and be able to identify times where it's appropriate to provide support, and then be able to do that in real time as someone progresses through their goal. So there are a couple of research questions that come from this that are sort of subtopics. So the first one is, how can we actually leverage crowds to provide this continuously available support? And we've come up with this idea of ad-hoc crowdsourcing, which is a novel crowdsourcing domain that we're defining where crowd workers are actually present and engaged in this activity space, so the crowd already exists. The second question that we've been thinking about is, so if we have this crowd, how can we actually provide this crowd just-in-time context so that they can participate in and just like participate continually as these different support opportunities become available to them? So the crowd is able to respond to these support opportunities as they're presented. And for this, we came up with the continual crowd support framework, which helps us coordinate these support tasks for pools of available ad hoc crowd workers. And the last question is, well, if we can coordinate these types of tasks for the crowd workers, that's great, but are they actually going to be motivated to complete them without us having to pay them? So how could we actually build upon their existing behaviors to design systems that are naturally motivating participation? And for this, we have come up with some ad hoc crowd contribution techniques that actually try to motivate participation by leveraging the crowd's intrinsic interest, since they're there for a given reason, right? They're participating in this activity space. And we do that by trying to understand their contextual role in that space. So to go into a little bit of each of these ideas, we have attempted to define ad hoc crowds and just have been thinking about the core characteristics for them. So for starters, we have these few characteristics, and we might expand these, and I think this is one of the areas of the project that could probably use some more reflection about what these actual characteristics are. But to start, the ad hoc crowd workers who are present for a reason. So usually they are present in this activity space because they're working towards their own goal. So for example, at races, there are spectators who are present, and they're there because they're cheering for friends and family at that race. So they have this goal of like cheering for those friends and family. And in a research setting, you might be prioritizing your own project where you're trying to work on your research project in the context of a larger research group. The second characteristic is that there's the idea of like idle time that the ad hoc crowd might have. So this idle time is where they might be actually an underutilized resource in this broader ecosystem, but there's no clear way for them to know who they can help during that idle time, with what they can help, when, how, and like why they can actually provide support for other people in that space. And then lastly, there's this interesting characteristic where they, because they're part of this activity space, they're actually familiar with it already. So for example, with spectators, they are familiar with this task of cheering for people, so why not cheer for other people? And for being part of a research group, there may be parts of the research that you have done previously where you could actually provide support to other people with that domain knowledge. And it makes completing similar or related tasks in this activity space much easier. So we also have this idea of the continual crowd support framework, which actually supports this whole idea of coordinating these tasks. So how do you actually coordinate the tasks within the ad hoc crowd to make sure they're able to complete them? So there are different components to this. The first stage is the monitoring stage, where we're actually monitoring the state of the worker and the requesters in the space. While monitoring, we're sort of looking for opportunities, and then we move into the match stage. So the match stage is actually triggered by the system identifying a set of opportunities within the activity space. So still in the match phase, once you've triggered, then you can go on and optimize. So you have the set of support opportunities, but you can actually optimize and think about how to really figure out which ones are likely for the crowd worker to complete, and then create a subset of those tasks that you'll actually present to the crowd worker. And then from that subset, the crowd worker can then select and opt into a support task. So they have free reign in terms of deciding where they want to spend their time. Once we've completed the matching, we move on to the priming phase, which is takes care of the contextualizing of the task. So once the crowd worker is paired with the task, they might need certain information to be able to complete that task in real time. So there's this process of, as the task is sort of approaching, how do you provide information in a way where you're contextualizing the task so that the crowd worker can complete it just in time. Once the task is completed, then there's an important stage of verifying the task. So we want to verify whether the support was delivered by the crowd worker, whether it was received by the requester who was initially in need of the support, and then also measures of reacting. So trying to understand the affect and how that support was received. And then we could think about the stage of updating. So we've inserted this intervention of support through the crowd, and then we want to update the status of both the worker and the requester. So we can imagine doing things like updating the state of the worker, saying okay, they've overcome this blocker. We know that they have made this much progress towards their goal, and this is their new state. And same with the requester, they've used up this much of their idle time or this much of their resources, and they have an updated state. And then we continue, throughout this process, it's a cycle, right? So we keep monitoring, matching for different opportunities, contextualizing them, verifying them, etc. So it's an ongoing, continuous process. And then finally, we have these ad hoc crowd contribution techniques. So the first one is prioritizing the worker's primary goal. So the crowd workers are unlikely to complete other tasks if they're going to get in the way of their primary goal, right? So a spectator is not going to cheer for a runner if it's going to prevent them from being able to cheer for their friends and family. So say the runner is maybe a quarter mile ahead of their runner. If they're focusing on cheering for that person, then it might distract them from their primary goal. In research, you really want to be making progress on your research. So perhaps supporting someone on their other goals might get in the way of you completing your primary goal. So we want to make sure that you're making progress while still being able to engage in these support opportunities. And then there's this idea of sideloading support tasks. So Crowd workers are also unlikely to go out of their way to participate in other support opportunities, and this kind of happens for various reasons. So, so in races, it might just be inconvenient to go out of the way, or you might not really feel motivated to cheer for other people. A lot of this sometimes based on our need finding, a lot of this has to do with maybe not trusting the system, or like not trusting that you can actually cheer for other people and not miss your runner. And so in the research setting too, right, there's this element of trust. So you might not trust that you actually have enough time to be able to help someone. So you might be more reluctant to provide support. But what if we could identify those idle moments where you actually can provide support? So the technique is to identify these moments where there's almost low activation energy, and then side load tasks for the spectator by presenting them at these idle moments where we think they're likely to participate. And so we've been testing this through the context of races. So we have this app called CrowdCheer, which is an iOS app that has two primary purposes. So one is that it attempts to coordinate these cheering tasks for the ad hoc crowd of spectators, and then tries to motivate these spectators to cheer for other runners while they wait to cheer for their friends and family. Okay, and now we're going to jump into a little bit of how the system works just briefly, and then go through a demo. There we go. Okay, so in terms of the tech, I'm going to focus on some of these, most of the tech that we've done in this quarter has been around the second half of how do we actually motivate based on the two techniques that I just described, and what are the ways in which we could do that in the system. So I'm just going to highlight some of the quick things here. So this is the dashboard view controller that controls that view that you just saw, where you could see the favorite runner up top and then the general runners at the bottom who are nearby that you could cheer for while you're waiting. So at a high level, we during this phase and throughout the app, we're just constantly monitoring and looking for different support opportunities. So once we have a subset of runners that we know are nearby, we go through and try to consider our affinity to the runner. So affinity meaning, are they a general runner or are they one of our favorite runners, like friends and family? And then based on the changing distance of that person to us, so how close are they, we display different things on the app. So when the given runner is pretty far away, if they're a favorite runner, we want to always display them. But if they are a general runner, which is this case, we're not actually going to display them on the map, because there's no point in keeping track of other tasks that are far away, or not ones that you're not able to complete opportunistically. Once the runner starts to get closer, if they are a favorite runner, then we continue to display them in the system, and then we note that the favorite runner is actually nearby, and we keep track of that state. Similarly, if it's a general runner, we keep track that the general runner is nearby, and then display that runner in the dashboard. And then as the runner is getting very close, we do the same thing. So if it's so this is pretty much the same thing, but a different set of distances. And then if the runner is very close, so this is within 500 meters, if it's a favorite runner, we increase the tracking speed. So we go from like 30-second intervals of tracking to 5 seconds. And then we actually do this thing where we disable the general runners. So I could show that function in a little bit, but generally we sort of like in this view constantly toggle between these states of who should you be focusing on and updating the UI based on that. So when your favorite runner is nearby, we want you to be focusing on your favorite runner. And when your favorite runner is far away and there are other runners nearby that you could cheer for, we want you to be focusing on other runners and participating in those tasks. Okay. And then the other thing that I wanted to show real quick is the notification strategies that we're using in the system. Okay. So we've been thinking about these different ways in which we could notify the spectator that there are other runners, so general runners, that they could be cheering for and when to do that, so during those periods of idle time. So you saw before that we're keeping track of when their idle time is by keeping track of both when like general runners are nearby and when target runners are nearby, and using those two states we can determine whether or not they have idle time and whether or not there are other people that they could cheer for. So the two parts are important. So for example, we have this timer that's just like constantly checking for whether or not there are opportunities, and then we have a delay. So like if you've been notified in the last 10 minutes, right now I have it set to 1.5 just for testing, so for the demo, then we are not going to notify you again because we don't want to exhaust you with notifications. But basically we check to see are there runners nearby and are there no target runners nearby, meaning that I do have idle time and that there are opportunities that I could be participating in. Based on that, we basically there are two different notification strategies that we have, which I'll show you in a little bit. But one is that we can send just like a general notification saying like, hey, there are runners nearby, and here's the actual message. Some nearby runners need your help. Cheer for them while you wait. And this is just like an open call to say like, hey, there are people that you could be helping. Cheer for them while you wait. But there's this other notification strategy that we are also trying and testing to see how it compares. And it is slightly different. So it's attempting to provide information about your favorite runners while asking you to cheer for other people. So your favorite runner's far away, and the notification says whoever the runner is. So for example, Stella is like 12 miles out and she's doing well, but some other runners nearby might need your help. Cheer for them while you wait. So this is sort of satisfying this information need of the spectator, where we're giving them information about their primary goal and updating them on the state. And in doing so, we're kind of asking them on top of that, okay, so we've given you this information, are you willing to, now that you know that you have this idle time, cheer for other runners? Okay, and I think those are the high-level things that I wanted to show in the code. So I'm going to jump to a demo. Okay, so this is what the app looks like right now. Hopefully you can see that. But I have a simulation running on my laptop right now where it's basically just like simulating Stella's location as 12 miles away. So my favorite runner is far away. You can see that it's just updated. If I want to select here, show Stella's name. So I'm going to trigger some simulations of other runners nearby. And we'll just wait a couple seconds.
So this updates every 30 seconds to save battery, and then when the favorite runner gets closer, it increases the frequency. Okay, there we go. So you can see that the UI updated and the focus is on the runners near me at the bottom, and it says help these runners out while waiting. And it's kind of hard to see in the video, you can kind of see it there, but it shows that the runners are less than a mile away and prompts me to cheer for them. You'll notice that Stella does not have a cheer button because she's far away and we don't want the spectators to be going into a cheering interaction on Stella when she's that far away. So I'm going to go ahead and cheer for Caitlin. And then it loads this view. It's kind of hard to see. So it shows Caitlin approaching me on the map. So you can see the blue dot up here is me, and then Caitlin is showing up as a runner getting closer. And the map moves based on the heading. And then it says, Caitlin wants you to cheer. Looking strong, Caitlin, you got this. And it gives me a description of her outfit and then how far away she is. So I'm going to put this in the background. And I'm going to trigger Stella approaching. And then I'm going to stop the local simulation. So you'll see we got a notification. It says Stella is nearby, get ready to support them. So while we're in the middle of cheering for Caitlin, it's actually letting us know Stella is nearby and then it's time to support her. And I could either decide to cheer for Stella and like abandon this cheering interaction or click not now. So this is the system prioritizing cheering for Stella. So if I hit not now, we're going into this cheering interaction for Caitlin. If I hit cheer, even though it segued to this screen, it would have gone back. But the app is now prompting me to look up and cheer for Caitlin because she's getting close. And now it's telling me to cheer for Caitlin. So Caitlin has gotten so close that it's time to cheer, and the app is suggesting that I look away and cheer for Caitlin. Another thing we're doing on the screen is recording the cheer to verify whether or not the spectator has cheered. And then you could see once Caitlin has passed by, we get this notification saying, thank you for supporting Caitlin. Did you spot and cheer for her? You could say, yes, I did. No, I missed them. So I'm going to say yes. And then it just segues back. So we're back to the monitoring phase where you could see Stella is close by up there and Matt and Caitlin are far away. So you could see when Stella is close by, the UI switches, right? So it turns red, the cheer button appears, and it turns red, and you no longer see this alert banner down here to cheer for other runners. So the focus goes back up to Stella. And if I go into the background, it will send me notifications to cheer for Stella. Like that. Okay, and the other thing that I wanted to show is the notification interaction that I mentioned previously. So when your favorite runner is far away and general runners are close by, how does the app actually notify you and prompt you to cheer? So we're going to set off the general runner simulations again. Okay, and we see that our general runners showed up, so we're going to put the app in the background. And so it randomly chooses between the two different types of notifications that it's going to send. So cheer for cheer for runners that are nearby, and then giving the information about the favorite runners. So Stella's nearby, she's doing okay. Cheer for other runners while you wait. Okay, so this is the first type of notification. Some runners nearby need your help. Cheer for them while you wait. And then I'll just wait for the second type of notification. So there is a notification delay. In terms of the simulation, the smallest interval that I could set it to is 1.5 minutes. So I could just show you if we open the app. It or if we open the notification, it just loads the dashboard and then reinforces that message with the UI that we see down here. All right, and then if we put the app in the background again, when you're doing a demo, it's a good idea to turn off notifications for other things. So since it's randomized, there is a chance that it's going to show the other type of notification. If it does, just trust me that the other one shows up as well. Maybe we'll get lucky. Yeah, so that one says, Stella is 10 miles out and doing well, while, what does it say? But some nearby runners need your help. Cheer for them while you wait. So those are the two different notification types.
Okay, so jumping back, that was just a quick overview of the system and a demo. So we've been testing this at different races, and we have some preliminary study findings. There were some good things that we have seen in the races. So, for example, we tested at a race recently, and we saw some evidence that people were interested in cheering for other runners. So this is a quote from the post survey that we sent out, where a spectator was there cheering for a friend, and she said that she tried to look for her, her being the other runner. So we asked, like, who were, we asked questions about, like, did you cheer for other runners? If you did cheer for them, why? If you didn't cheer for them, what prevented you? So one of her responses was, I tried to look for her being the other runner, but it wasn't letting me track that runner. So one of the things that we've been running into a lot with this app is that it's complicated. It's really hard to be tracking the live and changing locations of different people and then have a UI respond to that in real time. So there have been a lot of technical challenges in terms of building the app. One thing that we were able to do this quarter is actually extend what was a pretty comprehensive test suite. So every time we run into issues like this, we try and collect a lot of data about what went wrong and understand, and then extend our checklists. So we have, like, I think the checklist now has like almost 300 items on it, of like various permutations and like versions of what the and that's just on the interface side, like what are the expected interface interactions that someone might experience during different parts of the app in different scenarios. So another thing that has been challenging about testing is just recruiting has been really hard. For a lot of the testing that we've been doing at races, we've pretty much been building and iterating and working on the tech up until the race, so we haven't been able to do a lot of advanced recruiting where we coordinate with the race organizations or charities or anything like that and recruit ahead of time. So we've been doing day of recruiting at the race, which is really hard. Runners are typically kind of panicky or just stressed or really focused on getting ready for the race. Oftentimes they don't want to test out new tech at the race in the event that just like fears that it'll mess with their phone or their phone will die during the race. So there have been a lot of different recruiting challenges of day of recruiting. And it's just not a lot of time. We only get about an hour to talk to many people. So we've been thinking about different strategies for recruiting. Now that we have a relatively stable system, thanks to a lot of the checklisting, we can think about actually deploying the app ahead of time and coordinating with races ahead of time where we can recruit and be confident that we have enough numbers to actually show the data that that will either confirm or deny our different arguments that we have in this paper. So kind of related to that, we're not sure whether we're actually doing enough to motivate support. So I think one of the riskiest things in this project going forward is just getting it out there and testing it so we could understand, like, are we actually doing enough to motivate support? So one of the more recent races we actually tested, and there were 2 pairs of people who installed the app and used it during the race, but for whatever reason they didn't actually use the app during the race. And in our database we saw that they were getting the notifications that it was working, they were tracking on their end, but the spectators just weren't using it to cheer for either their favorite runner or other runners. So there are things to consider there about whether we're motivating enough support, or maybe even just like exploring the possibility that there are other user classes of spectators that aren't really interested in providing support for other people. So that's sort of the preliminary findings that we have. So based on what we learned during those, there are a few next steps that we want to focus on. So primarily just doing these evaluations at races over the summer and recruiting ahead of time and using some of those strategies to make sure we get a solid test of the system, and really test our design arguments so we could understand whether or not we're doing enough motivation. And then based on whatever those findings are, we might need to do some additional design iterations on the system, particularly on the spectator motivation side. And then throughout the summer, if I have time, I'm also going to try and revise and just kind of refine the practical design arguments and then also the research arguments for this work and get that a little bit more polished. So that's pretty much what I've been working on this quarter. It was a really rewarding quarter, and I'm pretty happy with the progress that we made. There's still a lot of work to be done, but I'm feeling good about it and excited to test over the summer. So thank you.